Probate is a court supervised process for identifying and gathering the assets of a deceased person slash descendant, paying the descendant's debts, and distributing the descendant's assets to his or her beneficiaries. Generally speaking, most probate cases take 2 years or less, but not Claudia Valentine's case. This is Claudia Lee Valentine. She was born July 5th, 1916, and she died June 23rd, 2009. And to this day, her probate case is still open. This is Broward County's former probate judge, Charles M. Green. Judge Green was the presiding judge over Claudia's probate case. He did not require the personal representative or the resident agent to submit any legal documents whatsoever in the case, leaving the case open to this day. Albert K. Hunter was Claudia's oldest grandson, and he was appointed as Claudia's personal representative. Albert passed away on March 5th, 2022. As Claudia's personal representative, I don't think Albert was able to fully administer Claudia's estate, mainly because I don't think he knew what he was doing. This is Mr. Edward F. Johnson of Wilson and Johnson Law Firm. He was appointed as the resident agent on the Claudia Lee Valentine's probate case. Mr. Johnson did not administer the case properly himself, as he should have aided Albert, the personal representative in the case. He did not do so, also leaving the case open to this day. This is Mr. Riley Richard Rawls, a lawyer who signed a will with Claudia Valentine. The will in question did not list all of Claudia's assets, nor did the will list all of Claudia Valentine's descendants. Because of that, the will should be considered insufficient. However, the courts don't see it that way. Mr. Rawls passed away January 18, 2018, making it now impossible to challenge the will of Claudia Valentine. This is Mr. Roger T. Fleming, son of prominent lawyer and banker Foy Fleming, who is also Claudia Valentine's original lawyer and banker. Mr. Foy Fleming passed away in the 1980s. Currently, there's a P.O. box under Foy Fleming's name in the Department of Treasury of the state of Florida. And this is me, Antonio Ringo Davis, a U.S. Army combat veteran, one of Claudia's grandsons, and possibly the actual representative of her estate. In 2021, I tried to reopen Claudia's probate case, but the courts would not allow me to because I'm not a lawyer. I've tried for many years to reopen the case, but Judge Green insisted that I get a lawyer in order to open the case, even though there have been several lawyers already on the case. This is Mr. Anthony S. Adelson of the Adelson Law Firm, who is currently acting as the resident agent on Claudia's probate case. Mr. Adelson reopened the case using the same argument that I used when I tried to reopen the case. Mr. Adelson successfully reopened the case, however, he's having problems. The problem that Mr. Adelson has is he can't do anything without the personal representative. Claudia's probate case was opened on 09/14/2009 and was closed 09/22/2015, sua sponte, on its own accord due to inaction after 6 years. Now that I gave y'all some background information on what's going on, let me tell you in my words what's going on. So, my grandmother was born in 1916, and she has, from what I understand, between her parents, herself, and my grandfather, they have accumulated a great deal of assets. And at this point, I think that the state of Florida is trying to make sure that the assets that my grandmother has and that she inherited over these years, I believe that the state of Florida is trying to prevent my family from the rest of my family from inheriting it. Excuse me. So what I'm dealing with is pretty much the state of Florida has decided they're gonna do their own thing. The judges, everybody, they're gonna do their own thing when it comes to this case, when it comes to my grandmother's estate. And what I noticed has happened is that my family is broken apart because of this estate. Now I pointed out Mr. Roger T. Fleming. He is friends with my aunt and some of my cousins. And from what I understand, from what I was told, my cousins was telling me about what he told them with this estate, and what other lawyers are telling them is that they telling them don't even bother with the rest of my grandmother's assets because they're telling them that it would cost too much for them to get those assets. So they're basically telling my family, hey, if y'all get those assets, it's gonna cost you more than what you got. So we recommend that you don't even get it. So what has happened is, on top of them doing that, they're also blocking access to the rest of my grandmother's estate. Now we know my grandmother has a house, right? That's what we know for sure. Now, when I was younger, and I know a lot of my family, if they really honest with themselves, they know that my grandmother bought other property. The question is, where is all this other property that she had? Well, my belief is that it's in a PO box with the name Mr. Fleming, who my grandmother used to work for. I believe that the state is holding that PO box hostage and refused to allow that PO box to be administered in the probate case. And the reason why I say that is because through the whole probate case, this PO box has never came up with anybody. And when I went to the state, the Department of Treasury, to retrieve the PO box, this is this is what they told me at first. They first said that it was $5,000 in the PO box. Then they said it was $500. Now they're saying it's like 80 something dollars in the PO box. That's that's fishy. How does it go from 5,000 to 500 now, like 180 something or 80 something? And these are supposed to be refunds from my grandmother paying property taxes. On top of that, my cousin, who was the personal representative, they didn't do everything in the case. Like they didn't. They submitted a will and they submitted a letter for creditors, but there is absolutely no inventory of Claudia's assets whatsoever in the probate case. There's no the only thing that they have is a will that mentions my grandmother's house, but there's no deed to the house. There's no deed, there's no other assets to any of this. And from what I'm saying and from what I understand is that all of that is in that PO box that they would refuse to release to my family. Now my family, my aunt knows about this PO box and one of my cousins, and they're hiding their knowledge of this PO box from the rest of my family. So it's like I'm fighting all these battles. On top of that, I believe that I'm the personal representative of Claudia Valentine. And the reason why I think that is because my mother was supposed to inherit the house when my grand before my grandmother died. That was my grandmother's wishes, right? However, my mother passed away before my grandmother. So my grandmother willed the house off to my sister. Now, here's the issue. My sister, the reason why my grandmother wanted to will the house to my mother, because my grandmother told my mother about everything in her estate. My mother knew about all my grandmother's assets. So I'm guessing my grandmother thought that my sister knew the same thing, which she doesn't. The person who my mother told about all of this, or most of it, was me. But at the time, I was still in the military. So when my mother and my grandmother died in 2009, I was still in the military. So I had nothing to do with the probate case. It wasn't until I came home that a lot of things started to happen. One, the VA started to say that I had a mental health problem. That's the first thing that happened. I got involuntarily Bakerited. They tried to commit me and say that I have a mental health problem. Then after that, I ended up losing my job and I left Fort Lauderdale. I ended up going out and I was trying to figure out what was going on with my history, my family history. So this is where I found a lot of information about my grandmother and my great grandparents. This is where I found out that my great grandparents had land in Lake City, Florida, a lot of land. And this is also where I found out um, how my grandmother was adopted and all this other history that my mother already told me, but I didn't know it because you don't know something until you see it. So when I went on this little expedition, that's when I found out all this information about my family and about my history and all that stuff. So now, and this is also when I found out about the PO box because I remember my mother is the one who told me how to look up stuff on the Department of Treasury's website, the unclaimed property, and that is how I figured out about my grandmother's estate and all this other stuff. Now, since I once I found that out in 2016, I went to claim the PO box, and would you know it? When I went to go claim the PO box, and I went to the state capitol, that's when I started getting arrested. I got arrested several times for trying to claim this PO box. Right? Then I come home. Once I come home, my sister and the police trespassed me from the house, making it impossible for me to even reopen my grandmother's case. Now, at the same time, while they're trespassing me, I was trying to reopen the case back in 2021, and the judge wouldn't allow me to do it. Judge Green would not allow me to reopen this case. So, what I'm looking at here, this is just from my perspective of what's going on. I'm looking at a situation where, number one, I believe that all of this is because my was Seminole Indian. I think everything revolves around my heritage of being Seminole. And I also believe that all of this, it surrounds whatever wealth that's in my grandmother's estate, that's what it surrounds. And they're trying desperately to prevent my family from receiving this estate. And that is what I'm dealing with. That is basically what I'm dealing with. All right. Oh, and also with that, I believe that the Fleming family is trying to take the estate. So Roger Fleming, who's connected to my grandmother, his father was Mr. Foy Fleming. His father, my grandmother supposedly worked for his father. So I believe that he, along with the rest of the lawyers in the state of Florida and judges, are trying to take my grandmother's estate because he keeps telling my family, oh, if you get this estate, it costs too much. Now, by us being Native American, we don't pay any taxes. But the state of Florida removed those laws about Native Americans. But they're not telling you that. So that's my story. You know what I mean? I don't know what else to tell you, but that's it. That's it for as far as my grandmother's estate is concerned.